For the past 3 episodes now, I've been working on this village. In case you missed them, here's a quick recap. We built a train to get here. We built a fully automatic bread system to feed the villagers inside of this villager breeder so that they can fill this house up with an infinite amount of villagers. And in the very last episode, we made this thing, which is an automatic zombification machine. Pretty much, you come in here with your nice healed villager and you tell the zombie to have at it, and you close this trapdoor to give them some privacy, because the zombie very much likes to be mad at you rather than the villager, and then you heal the now zombified villager, and that makes them grateful and lowers their prices a ridiculous amount. But there's actually a problem with this machine that I didn't address in the last video because, well, it is a very long solution. If we break this, find a dropper that is empty, and that is where the golden apples normally come out of, and I am completely out of golden apples, which is kind of unfortunate because I really need to zombify like a ridiculous amount of these guys. It's probably going to be in the hundreds, and it's 1 golden apple per. Of course, there is one other resource that also goes into this, and that's weakness potion, and this episode was actually originally going to be about getting weakness potion, but now I've built this, and I've done 5 zombifications with it, and originally had 1,000 millibuckets in this little thing, and it's only down to 995, which means it's used 5 1,000ths of a bucket, which essentially means that I'm going to get 1,000 zombifications before I run out, and that's more than I'll ever need, so I don't actually need to do that. So instead we're focusing on golden apples, which is really unfortunate because I need to zombify hundreds of these guys, and each zombification requires a golden apple, which means I need a couple hundred of these things, and I do not have that much gold, not even close, nor do I have the apples for that, but luckily both gold and apples are automatically farmable. So in today's episode, that is exactly what we're going to do. Apples are really easy. You just have to make either a dark oak tree or an oak tree farm and then have a source of bone meal to grow them, and that is essentially an infinite source of apples. But gold, on the other hand, is a little bit more difficult. Now, normally gold is actually super easy. In fact, automated gold farms are my favorite thing in this game. They are beautiful. But automated gold farms are generally built in the Nether, which isn't really ideal for my village. They also require the player to be there, which isn't really gonna work, because I want this system to be fully automatic and passive just while I'm sitting in the village. So while I'm like refreshing the trade on a villager or something, it'll just be generating golden apples. And that means I have to do an overworld gold farm, which is a whole lot harder. But definitely not impossible, so let's go look at some designs. This is the classic overworld gold farm. It's just a whole lot of nether portals, and then you would have some collection system down here to collect all the zombified piglin that come out, because there's a chance that zombified piglin can kind of just appear in the nether portals, and then of course when they die, they drop gold. And if we go ahead and turn on the mob spawning in this world, I have it currently set to 100 times speed, so we will get a lot of zombified piglin. And you'll notice they kind of just sit in the portal, but if you had a collection system down here, they would walk off a lot more willingly than if it's a giant pit down to lava. And this thing is producing a lot of zombified piglin, but keep in mind this is at 100 times speed, so it really doesn't produce all that much. In fact, in 1 hour, it would produce enough gold for 2 golden apples, which is definitely not enough. So this design is probably not going to be the one to go for. And normally this would actually be the only option, but luckily because of the create mod, there are other ways to automatically generate gold, specifically this. This is a ginormous chain of create contraptions that turns a cobblestone from a cobblestone generator into gold. So let's see how it works. First, you start with cobblestone from this generator, which can be fully automated with a drill, and you take that cobblestone and you throw it into a pair of giant crushing wheels, which turns it into gravel. Then you take that gravel and throw it into another pair of crushing wheels, and you get sand. Now, sand you have to wash a bunch of, because there is a 25% chance that when you wash sand, you get balls of clay, and it takes a while because I put a full stack in, but we should get at least some. We got 16, that's pretty good, and we can throw that clay into a press to get a block of clay, which can then be smelted with this lava fan setup into terracotta. That terracotta can be thrown into yet another pair of giant crushing wheels to get red sand, and when you put red sand into a washing machine, you get a 12% chance 3 times for golden nuggets. There's also a chance for dead bushes for some reason, but we can kind of just discard those. And the golden nuggets can be put into another compactor and made into golden ingots that we can use to make golden apples. Now, you might think that this system is ridiculously complicated, and well, you would be right, but it's actually more efficient than this giant nether portal setup in terms of gold generation. Like I said, this one does 2 golden apples per hour, and this one does 6. So it's just about 3 times more efficient than that thing. So we're definitely going to be going with this one, even though it does feel a little janky. So I guess let's go build this thing in survival, but I'm not just going to shove this entire chain of stuff together and like stack it on a tower and throw it underground, because that's not what I've been doing with this village, and I want to continue to make things look pretty. So instead, I'm going to break up this giant system of 9 different contraptions into 3 buildings, and we'll have 3 contraptions per building. We're going to start with the cobblestone generator, and then the 2 sets of crushing wheels that turn that cobblestone into sand. Then that sand will be brought to a different building where it can be washed, compacted, and smelted into terracotta, which will then be sent to the 3rd and final building where it gets crushed, washed, and compacted into the final product of gold ingots. And then somewhere we'll have a crafting thing that takes those gold ingots in addition with apples and makes golden apples, but I'll figure that out once I've actually done the apple farm. For now, let's go ahead and get building on this first set. So this is what I came up with for the first set of stuff. I made a little path that goes down beneath the bridge and into this nice little ravine that's kind of naturally occurring, and I put a little house down here. I figured it kind of makes sense to be down here since this is like the stone generator, and then obviously turning that cobblestone into gravel and then sand. So it's like almost like a mine, so it's down the ravine where a mine would be. Of course, the building itself does not look like a mining building in the slightest. It just is down here, but I think it turned out pretty well. And the interior is similarly very nondescript and kind of boring, but it's really just these bits that matter. We have the cobblestone generator and the 2 giant pairs of crushing wheels. They're both off right now because I figure that if I turn them on, it will completely overflow this chest with sand before I even get any of the other sections built. So let's go ahead and get on to the next one. And that one I think is going to be a pottery hut, because this one is taking sand and turning it into terracotta, which isn't quite what a pottery person does. They're just called a potter, aren't they? It's a weird name, I don't know. But it's pretty close. You know, they would take mud, turn it into terracotta, like fired pots and stuff, but this is sand to terracotta, so I think it kind of makes sense. And I'm going to put it right here just because the actual mechanics of this thing are right here, so it will be a nice easy transfer to get the sand from here up to there. So let's go ahead and build a little pottery hut. And that is that done. We have a nice little pottery hut. Ignore the floating leaves. I'll fix that at some point, maybe. But I think this one turned out really well. It's another just pretty basic building, but, you know, it looks good and it's still in the villager style, so I think it's great. And the inside is where it really shines. I actually really love the interior I've done here, so it got like a little pottery wheel and a nice little seat, and this thing will be spinning eventually. And then there's clay and some pots laying around. I think it looks really good. But there is one problem, which we'll get to in a second. But first, let's head downstairs where all of the magic actually happens. This is just decorational, by the way, in case you're wondering. But pretty much we have the washing mechanism to take the, what is it, sand? Yeah, sand, wash it into clay, take that clay, compress it into clay blocks, take those clay blocks and put them here and turn it into terracotta. And of course, that's not going to go anywhere yet. But this is where we get to the problem. All of this is still completely stationary, and I was actually going to add in a power source after I built this building, but I've run into an issue. So back in my creative testing world where I designed both of these buildings, I went ahead and tested it to see how much power it actually uses, and the answer is just about 20,000. 20,000 is so much that I cannot possibly just kind of make that amount of power off camera. I mean, the last time I needed 20,000 stress units was actually never. The closest it ever got was back at my base when I built that ore crushing machine. That thing required a fraction of 20,000. I been 15,000 actually, but that's technically a fraction of 20,000. And you know what I did for that? I spent 5 episodes working on a power solution called the steam engine that is absolutely overpowered and produces like 290,000. But unfortunately, that steam engine is way over there. And if we pop into FreeCam, it is out of my render distance, which means we cannot use it to actually power this whole system. I have to make a local power supply. So my first thought was, let's just do everything that I've been doing so far. You know, this is powered by some water wheels, that's powered by a windmill, obviously. So I figured out how many windmills I would need to power just these 2 huts. And it would not just be one of these windmills. It would not just be 2 of these windmills. It would be a whole 3 of these windmills, but twice as big. Each of these limbs would have to be 2 times longer, which is the maximum size for a windmill, and I would need 3 of them to power just these 2 huts because they use so much stress. And while I could just throw in some windmills underground somewhere, maybe in the ravine, that could look cool, I guess, or I could even build like gigantic buildings so that a windmill of that size looks nice, but I'd have to build 3 of them. And that is just a little bit ridiculous, and by a little I mean a lot. So we're not going to be doing that, but that does mean that I have to use a steam engine. But I don't have to spend 2 episodes or 3 episodes actually making the steam engine, because the max level steam engine would be just a little bit overkill. I don't need 290 stress units to power my 20,000 stress units here. But we can make a smaller steam engine that doesn't produce as much power. So to show off the other options for steam engines, I've popped over into the creative testing world again, and these are the 2 that are essentially options. This one is completely passive. It requires no fuel. It just requires a little bit of rotational input, and this can be done with like a couple water wheels or a very, very small windmill. It's a super tiny requirement. But this thing only produces 2,000 stress units, which is 1/10 of what we need, so I would need to build 10 of these. And while 10 of these is not completely infeasible, because they are really small, I don't really want to just kind of make 10 of something that kind of works. It's kind of like the windmill solution. I don't want to just make a ton of something that gives me a little bit to get the amount that I actually need. Instead, we're going to be going with this one, which is not that much bigger, and you might think, well, obviously go with this one. It's way better, isn't it? Because this is producing 65,000 stress units, like almost 32 times what this produces, and it's the same amount of water input. And the thing is, this is powered by campfires. They require no fuel. They're very nice. This is powered by blaze burners, which are a whole lot more complicated. If we get out a blaze burner, it looks like this normally. These guys are hyped up on creative mode steroids that make them permanently on. But if we were to grab some sticks and give this guy some sticks, he turns on like this, and he will stay on like this for as long as these sticks would last in a furnace, or 1 stick, which is not much. And now he's off again. So we need to provide these blaze burners with fuel for this thing to be producing 65,000. And this is why it took me so long to build a steam engine the last time I did it, because I got the best fuel source for these guys, which is a really complicated production process. But just having them not supercharged, but just this level of on, is actually pretty easy, and we can definitely do it. In fact, I was actually already planning on doing this, but not, like, purposefully, because we're making golden apples right now. That's, like, the entire point, and apples require an oak tree farm, which drops apples from the leaves, but you also get the logs as a side effect, and logs can be used to fuel blaze burners, and unlike sticks, logs actually, you know, last a little bit. I mean, it's still not an incredibly long amount of time, but if we just make a pretty good oak tree farm that produces, let's say, I don't know, a couple logs per 15 seconds, which I believe is how long a log lasts in a blaze burner, then we're completely fine. And to produce, what, 4 logs per 15 seconds? That is a completely doable thing. So we just have to wait until I actually make the oak tree farm to power this steam engine, which will power the entire thing. And honestly, the gold isn't useful until we have apples, so that works out just fine. But before we actually get to fixing this power thing and making the oak tree farm, I want to actually get the last 3 machines in this whole lineup done with just one last building, and I have no idea what the theme for it's going to be yet, but I suppose I'll figure that out when I'm designing it, and I'll tell you guys about it in a second. I think my unoriginality has reached a new high, because if we head over here, I've built this, which is almost an exact one-for-one copy of the vanilla Minecraft blacksmith. And honestly, I don't really care. The vanilla designs look really good, and I think that this one also looks really good. And honestly, blacksmiths are just like iconic. This like smooth stone slab kind of lining on the roof, the little pit of lava there. I love how they look. So I'm actually kind of excited to have one in this village that did not spawn with one, which would have been nice in the very early game. But it turned out pretty good. It is literally just I copied the design that's in vanilla Minecraft, but I completely stripped the interior and replaced it with a bunch of functional parts. This is the three things that we need in this building. The terracotta comes in, gets ground into red sand, which goes onto these depots, which gets washed by the water that is beneath them, which works despite the fact that the items are on top of the depot, but you know, I'll take it, it's fine with me. And then it gets taken from there and put into here, because that washed down into gold nuggets and dead bushes. The dead bushes, of course, gets trashed, but the gold nuggets go into here and get compacted into gold ingots, which is the final product of this whole 3-building system. But there's kind of an issue, because when I built this in my creative testing world, obviously it actually can have power in the creative testing world, because you can just have unlimited power in creative mode, which is very nice. But pretty much I tested it and I let it run for an hour just to make sure that the 48 gold ingots per hour was still accurate. And guess what? It's not even close. For an hour, it got 7 golden ingots, which is not even enough for 1 golden apple, let alone the 7 per hour that I was thinking this would produce. But while that is a ridiculously small amount, and a different gold farm design would not do that and probably be better, I already built this one and I kind of want to see it through now, because it's a really ridiculously complicated system. But if that ridiculously complicated system worked, that would be like really cool. So I'm going to kind of show you guys the problem that I'm pretty sure is the case, but I can't really do that here because none of these buildings have power. So let's pop over into the creative version of this world and check out the issue. So the culmination of this issue is really here in the final building, and you'll notice most of these machines that I have, like the presses and these grindings and now this washing area, they're not doing anything, and they're not doing anything most of the time. They do, you know, occasionally get items in, but I did just throw in a bunch of extra items past what it produces, so normally it's a lot less than this, actually. And because of the fact that these are mostly not doing anything, means that some other part of the system is slow enough that it's limiting this section. So if we head over into the Pottery Hut's basement, I can actually go into spectator mode for this because we're in creative mode, you'll notice this machine isn't doing anything, and so is this one. And the actually only machine that's doing anything in here most of the time is this one, which is almost constantly running and washing sand. So this one's the bottleneck then, right? Well, it's actually not, because this is washing one piece of sand at a time, which is almost impossible to see, but that is what's happening. And while it is doing it constantly, it's not actually going as fast as it could be because it's doing one at a time. The actual bottleneck is down here in this chest, this sand, which is really the cobblestone that's being generated by this generator. It's just not enough to keep up with how fast the rest of the system can go, so I need to fix this. Because if this cobblestone generator were infinitely generating cobblestone and it wasn't a bother at all, we would be doing stacks and stacks at a time, and this washing machine that is technically the bottleneck right now would be going at like way more efficiency, because it would be doing 64 at a time instead of 1. So the whole solution to fixing this thing is making this just more. It needs to generate more cobblestone. Currently, it generates about 2.8 cobblestone per second, and that is without the time between cobblestone formations. That's just the drill time. And if I want to have an essentially infinite source of cobblestone that keeps up with the rest of the system, I just need about a stack of cobblestone per second, which sounds like a ton, but it's not actually that bad. It would just be like 20 more of these cobblestone generators, which is completely doable. In fact, that's actually not that bad of a solution, so I'm just going to go ahead and build that. We're back in the survival world, and that is the look of 20 brand new cobblestone generators that are all hooked up to the system. They have a conveyor belt at the bottom to get all the cobblestone in here, and I've even reworked this entire thing. So the whole reason things weren't going fast was we were doing one item at a time. So because of this barrel and this thing that's set to 64, we will only ever do a full stack of items each time, which is absolutely great because it means the entire thing will go a lot faster, even if it isn't constantly outputting items. But honestly, with this many cobble generators, I don't think we're going to have a problem with the amount of items we're outputting, so it should work just fine. But of course, that is still purely theoretical, because I didn't build 4 or 20 new cobble generators in creative mode, so I haven't tested it. And well, this thing still doesn't have power, so I can't really test it. So I guess that's the next thing to do. We have to actually go ahead and build that steam engine. But the thing is, we are kind of running out of time for this episode, and we definitely don't have enough time for that entire project. So I'm going to go ahead and end this one here. Next time, we will make a oak tree farm to get apples and wood to fuel that steam engine, and then we can finally have an infinite source of golden apples for this building right here, and we can zombify and heal as many villagers as we want, and maybe even actually start working on a villager trading hall. You know, on like the 4th episode of working on this village, we can actually start getting on that. That'd be pretty cool, I think. But for now, I really hope you liked this one, and I will see you next time.